A very good evening to you once again. The country celebrates the centenary of struggle icon Albertina Sisulu this year. While some believe her role in the country's liberation struggle hasn't been documented sufficiently. When analysts say South Africa must look at ways of rewriting its history to highlight the contributions made by women, including MaSisulu, in the fight against apartheid.
Mama Albertina Sisulu, a struggle icon in her own right. She was crucial in the Defiance campaign in 1952, organizing women through the Federation of South African Women. MaSisulu led the United Democratic Movement when the ANC was banned in the country.
During that absence of the ANC in the country, MaSisulu became the leader of the ANC under the banner of the United Democratic Front. And that for me shows that even against all odds, the ANC had, in a very difficult period, found a woman to be capable of leading.
Trying to find archive of MaSisulu and her role in the history of this country is a challenge. She got lost in her husband's shadow.
The challenge is with us, the academics and others and historians, that we really have not foregrounded the role that women have played. It is not as if women themselves did not play a role. In fact, they played much more leading role, because right through into the 80s, she was central in the formation of the UDF, the United Democratic Front, which was a front organization through which the ANC could work inside the country. So indeed, I think that she was a giant figure in her own terms.
She was much more than an activist, a mother of 5, who after being arrested and banned a number of times, still had to raise her children.
History tells us they had, on Christmas, the first Christmas after Mr. Sisulu was arrested, they had almost hardly anything to eat, and they kept themselves indoors during the festive season, because they had nothing to eat. Nonetheless, she was very active, and she was also amongst the very first people to be arrested in the early 60s for what was called under the General Amendment laws, which were laws that came into being when the apartheid government realized that the anti-apartheid struggle was gaining momentum.
Her great love for primary health care touched many.
She used to knock in Orlando door to door, looking after the sick. She used to go and wash newly born babies and feed newly born babies when mothers have come from hospital after an operation.
Using her example, young people have been encouraged to never give up hope for a better life. Busisiwe Jemsana Mantashe, SABC News, Eastern Cape.
And joining us now to talk about the centenary of the struggle icon is her grandson, Duma Sisulu. Very good evening to you, Duma. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Would you agree with the belief of some that perhaps your grandmother's role in the liberation struggle has not been sufficiently documented?
Firstly, good evening, and thanks for having me. Yes, we believe that, and it's not just myself, it's my family as well. And it's not just the role of MaSisulu, but the role of women in general. There's a lot of women in the struggle whose stories have not been told. Yeah. The family has taken an active role in that, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. MaSisulu did a lot for the country, not just things that you would hear about or you'd see. She did a lot for her community. Yeah. Every day she would walk to work, and she'd walk with her big briefcase on her head. And along the journey, on her way to work, she would stop by and listen to people in the community. She'd hear what they have to say, and she'd give advice, and oftentimes she'd give medical advice. This is long after her time over the clinic is done. Yeah. So on her way home, she's still helping her community. She did so much in terms of, there was people who would come to the clinic under the guise of their being sick, but they actually weren't sick. They were coming to do underground political work. Yes. So there's a lot of stories about MaSisulu that haven't been told, and we as a family are looking at ways that we can tell these stories.
How would you want, as a family, to mark this centenary, and in looking at MaSisulu's life and times, and perhaps to shed some more light on those untold stories about the role that she played in the fight against apartheid?
Okay. The first one I'd like to talk about is her role in the marches. her role has been somewhat covered, but what she often told us and spoke to my mom in particular about, that's Eleanor Sisulu, the author of the book Mama Albertina Sisulu, in our lifetime. She spoke a lot about, there's a lot of women's stories who are not told. There was 20,000 women who marched, but we hear about 4 or 5 stories of the people who are there. There's a lot of women, we need to hear the social stories of what it was like to get there, what it was like to leave your home at 2 in the morning to travel all the way to Pretoria from all around the country. So the family has embarked on something which we're calling the marches, where we're calling upon South Africa to tell us about the stories of all these women who have marched or who have marched and their stories haven't been told. So we're asking their grandchildren, their children, and them who are still alive to come forward and tell us how it was for them. And we're available at the marches at #the_marches on Twitter and the marches at sisulu.co.za. So that's how we want to record the history of MaSisulu and the history of the woman. And then going back to the centenary. So for this year, we wanted to do something, the family wanted to do something that is not just a big celebration and a big party and then tomorrow we go back to our general lives. So we thought about how we would celebrate her. It would be something in line with what she used to do. And our celebration of her life would be how she lived her life. So the family has decided that the celebrations tomorrow are going to be centered around the institutions of her community. These are the institutions that she dedicated life to and that she worked in. This is the church, it's called Holy Cross Anglican Church. There's a creche next to it, which is Holy Cross Creche, and there's a library, Orlando West Children's Library and Shanti Clinic where she worked, and Albertina Sisulu Center where she started. So we'll take a walk from her home. This is the walk that she used to walk on her way to work, and we'd stop at these sites along the way. And in doing that, we will then walk and we'll see the community and we'll engage with the community.
We know that part of tomorrow there will be wreaths that will be laid, first of all, in the morning at the cemetery. But I want to talk about, South Africa is faced with quite a number of challenges today, not overlooking, of course, the great gains that have been made because of the contributions of people like MaSisulu. But what do you think she would say about South Africa today and South Africa's democracy?
She would say a lot. There's 2 sides of what she would say. There'd be the positive side, which she'd be happy about, which is most of South Africans have food, most of South Africans have shelter and homes and electricity and so on. But she'd also be very unhappy with the small percentage that have not been granted this. Taking into account the water issues in Guyana, these are things that she would have brought to light. When people would visit her, particularly politicians, she often would ask them, for example, with medicines, why are you not giving the children the medicines? What is the reason? And she would often challenge people straight up like that. I think she'd be doing a lot of that now.
All right. Duma Sisulu, the grandson of Ma Albertina Sisulu, of course, looking to that centenary celebration that will be taking place tomorrow. Let's take a short break. We'll be back with the news at 9 straight after this.